Have you ever wondered what would happen if Yuji Itadori had the 10 Shadows technique on top of everything he already carries as Sukuna's vessel? So if Yuji has all of it, what happens to Mahito, to Nanami, to Sukuna himself when the person standing across from them has all of those techniques at the same time? But here's the biggest thing to understand first. Having both techniques from day one does not mean having everything. Each shikigami still has to be earned, tamed through ritual combat before it can be summoned. So this is a story about a Yuji who starts with 2 Shadow Wolves and builds toward the one shikigami that has never bowed to anyone, ever. It starts the same way it always does. Megumi shows up at the school looking for Sukuna's finger. The cursed spirit breaks out. Yuji runs toward the danger before anyone finishes explaining what it is. When he picks up the finger, the familiar surge of Sukuna's cursed energy hits immediately, but something else responds at the same time. The shadows at his feet shift and 2 wolves pull themselves out of the darkness and stand beside him without being called. Black and white, already scanning the cursed spirit with the keen senses of shikigami built specifically for tracking and combat. Yuji looks down at them, looks at the cursed spirit, and does what Yuji always does. He runs straight at it. The divine dogs hit from both sides, while Dismantle fires down the middle on instinct. Both techniques working together in the same motion without Yuji consciously coordinating them. The cursed spirit never finds a clean angle. It's over in 8 seconds. Megumi stands in the hallway staring at the 2 shadow wolves dissolving back into the floor and the clean cut hanging in the air, and has approximately 12 questions he doesn't know how to start asking. Gojo arrives on the rooftop and feels what Megumi couldn't put into words. Shrine and 10 shadows running simultaneously through the same person. 2 inherited techniques that have never shared a body in all of recorded Jujutsu history. He goes completely silent, which for Gojo means something genuinely significant just happened. Then he brings Yuji in immediately, not as a vessel to be managed, as a student to be developed before anyone else figures out what is standing on that rooftop, and the first thing he tells Yuji is that the divine dogs are just the beginning. The special grade curse inside the detention center was a death sentence in the original story. Here it becomes a milestone. Yuji enters with divine dogs moving through the shadows ahead of him, mapping every room before he reaches it through the sensory connection the technique maintains between shikigami and user. The curse never gets its ambush. Yuji knows exactly where it is before it knows he's in the building. When it finally commits to an attack, it runs into divine dog totality, intercepting from one side and Dismantle firing through the middle simultaneously. The fight ends before it becomes the catastrophe it originally was, but the detention center matters for a different reason, because the moment that fight ends, Yuji feels the next 2 shikigami pressing against the shadow layer, their presence stronger than anything he's felt since the divine dogs first showed up. No makes itself known first, an owl-shaped silhouette pushing against the inside of the shadow, fast and electric and completely different from anything the wolves brought. The ritual is harder than the dogs were, but Shrine at contact range breaks the taming fight faster than Nue expected. Great Serpent is waiting right behind it, massive and patient, the constriction inside the shadow layer almost impossible to break without firing Dismantle directly through the contact point. It takes everything Yuji has, but he comes out with 4 shikigami and a higher-ups report that nobody in that building knows how to properly file. Mahito appears his power requires contact with the soul layer of his target, and every time he reaches for that contact, the shadow layer around Yuji becomes a problem he didn't account for. Divine Dog Totality comes out of the shadow behind his reaching hand and forces a redirect. Nu drops from above with an electric strike when he tries to create distance. Great Serpent comes up from the ground when he commits to a lunge, but Mahito finds the gaps the way Mahito always finds gaps, adapting in real time, identifying that 6 shikigami would give Yuji complete coverage and 4 still leaves angles he can work with. The fight is genuinely hard, which is exactly why it earns the next 2. After the fight, Toad unlocks almost immediately, its grappling and restraint capability making itself available as the natural next step now that Yuji's output has reached the threshold the ritual requires. Max Elephant is a completely different problem. The cursed energy it operates on makes the taming ritual the hardest thing Yuji has gone through in the shadow layer yet. The sheer weight of it pressing from every angle simultaneously while he fights through being flooded and crushed at the same time. He comes out of it soaking wet and grinning, because now he has 6 shikigami, and Mahito the next time they meet is going to have a very different night. In Shibuya, Gojo gets sealed. The trap was never about power. It was always about strategy and timing and Kenjaku's patience. And 6 shikigami and shrine don't give you advance warning of something you don't know is coming. Gojo walks into it and the ward erupts, and Yuji enters Shibuya as the most dangerous thing left on the battlefield. He moves through the transfigured humans with shikigami clearing every angle simultaneously. Divine Dog totality ahead of him, Nu sweeping from above, Great Serpent cutting through crowds below, Dismantle handling everything that gets close. He is not reacting. He is moving through Shibuya like someone who has already decided where every piece goes. Choso finds him and fires piercing blood. Great Serpent takes the hit directly and absorbs the output before it reaches Yuji. The exchange that follows ends with cleave at the range where Choso runs out of options. Then Mahito appears, and this time the coverage is different. Toad restrains him from below the moment he commits to a lunge. Max Elephant floods the corridor he tries to retreat into, wells unknown. Abyss, the fusion of Toad and Nue that Yuji unlocked between arcs, grabs him from above and electrocutes him mid-repositioning. Every time Mahito thinks he has the geometry figured out, the shadows shift and the geometry is different. Mahito finds the answer anyway because Mahito is smart. He creates hundreds of transfigured humans simultaneously pushing from every direction, forcing Yuji to pull every shikigami back to contain the perimeter. For a few seconds, Yuji is managing everything at once, and Mahito is closing the distance behind the wave, and the angle is actually there. That is the moment Yuji has been building towards since the first day Gojo explained what Mahoraga was. He reaches into the deepest shadow and calls the 8-handled sword divergent Sela Divine General Mahoraga. The summoning changes the atmosphere of the entire ward immediately. Every transfigured human in range stops moving. Mahito stops moving, because what just emerged from Yuji's shadow is not a shikigami in the normal sense. It is the thing that sits at the top of a technique with no ceiling and has never bowed to anyone in the history of Jujutsu sorcery. The taming ritual begins. Mahoraga's wheel spins, starting the adaptation cycle that has defeated every previous user of this technique. It adapts to dismantle first. Within 2 exchanges, shrine slashes are hitting the adaptation layer and losing effectiveness. Yuji switches to 10 shadows immediately, pushing multiple shikigami at once. The wheel spins again, trying to lock onto the new input. Adaptation shifts to 10 shadows. Yuji switches back to shrine. The wheel spins faster, trying to hold both adaptations simultaneously. But every previous user of this technique had one power set, one approach, one thing for Mahoraga to solve. Yuji has 2, operating on completely different cursed energy principles, and switching between them means the adaptation cycle can never complete before the input changes again. The fight lasts a long time. It costs more than anything in this story so far, but eventually the wheel slows. The adaptation stalls. Yuji walks through the gap with a cleave that reaches Mahoraga's core at the exact moment the ritual window opens. Then, for the first time in the history of the 10 Shadows technique, it bows. Yuji turns back to Mahito, who has been watching all of this with an expression that has never appeared on his face before. The combination of shrine and a fully tame Mahoraga ends Mahito permanently. Nanami survives because Yuji gets there in time. Nobara survives because the moment that cost her in the original story never gets its opening. Gojo is still sealed, and that weight is real, but everyone who was supposed to die tonight is still breathing. And Kenjaku, reading the reports from Shibuya, feels something he has not felt in 1,000 years of executing a plan with no real variables. Uncertainty. Time passes. Gojo gets freed. The culling game gets dismantled faster than Kenjaku projected because a Yuji with 9 shikigami and shrine running simultaneously is not the player the game was designed to contain. And eventually December 24th arrives and Gojo fights Sukuna the way it was always going to happen. But what waits on the other side of that fight is different from anything Sukuna planned for. When Yuji enters the final confrontation, Chimera Shadow Garden expands across Shinjuku immediately, the ground becoming shadow, shikigami emerging from every angle at once, while Shrine's output fills the space between them. Sukuna, who used the 10 shadows through Megumi and knows the technique from the inside, has never seen it combined with Shrine simultaneously, and has no framework for what that combination looks like from the outside. He finds the pattern eventually because Sukuna always finds the pattern, reads the windows between Shrine's output and the shikigami positioning, identifies the specific gap where both techniques are committed elsewhere at the same time, commits to the strike that was supposed to end it, and Mahoraga, which has been adapting to Sukuna's techniques since the fight started, completes its adaptation to world-cutting slash in the exact moment Sukuna thinks he has the opening. The attack gets redirected by an adaptation built specifically for this moment, the same adaptation that Sukuna used against Gojo, now working against its original user for the first time. Yuji closes the distance through the redirected strike and lands a black flash, his most personal technique, amplified through Shrine's output, hitting the soul layer that Yuji's fists have always been able to reach at a level level that nothing in this fight has managed to block. Sukuna ends, not with a speech, just ends. The way things end when someone brings more to a fight than any previous version of it ever had. A boy with 2 techniques that had no business sharing a body, who earned every shikigami through every arc, who tamed the untamable in the middle of Shibuya when everything was falling apart, and who used all of it together when it was actually needed. Drop a comment on what you think the most broken moment in this entire timeline was, and if you want more Jujutsu Kaisen what ifs just like this one, subscribe. We've got plenty more coming. See you in the next one.